Today is Monday, December 26, 2016. And I hope you had a Merry Christmas, spending with your family and friends, got a lot of prizes, surprises, and whatever else, whatever have you. But today we get back to business, and there's a very, very hot topic right now. It's very contentious. People are really on both sides of it. I may lose a few of you today from the questions I ask, but I got to ask the question. And I want this video more than anything to be about discussion that'll be civil rather than people screaming at one another. And that topic is the whole UN resolution. Now, before we get into it, before I show you what was said or whatever, a resolution from the UN is non-binding. So it's not like this big one world government can come down and say to a sovereign country what they have to do. That's not how that works. They just come out with resolutions that say this is what should happen. I think there was one from the UN that said something about reparations. That ain't going to happen. I'm not sure if that was a UN or some other place, but the UN, they just come together and then they just make suggestions and resolutions to countries, much of which don't really get followed. I think there was one about Russia and Crimea, and the resolution was about Crimea's sovereignty. Now, of course, Russia did not acknowledge that because they annexed Crimea, which, by the way, at one point was part of Russia and is right there close to Russia. Many people that are in Crimea are ethnically Russian and they speak Russian, but I digress. To get back to this point here, we're talking about Benjamin Netanyahu, we're talking about Israel, and we're talking about their resolution that said that they cannot continue to build settlements into the West Bank. Now, before we get into it, I just want to tee it up for you, show you this very short clip on Fox News. And then once you see that, we'll come back and we'll discuss it further. So without further ado, go ahead and roll it.
Welcome to Hannity. President Obama stabbing Israel in the back on his way out of office. I'm Eric Bolling in for Sean tonight. Former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, John Bolton, is fired up and will be here in just a moment with reaction. But first, in what many are calling the ultimate betrayal in America's alliance with Israel, the Obama administration earlier today allowed the United Nations to pass a resolution condemning Israeli settlements in East Jerusalem and the West Bank as, quote, a flagrant violation of international law. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is reacting by saying, quote, Israel rejects the shameful anti-Israel resolution at the UN and will not abide by its terms. Netanyahu adding, quote, the Obama administration not only failed to protect Israel against this gang up at the UN, it colluded with it behind the scenes. And President-elect Donald Trump is responding by tweeting this, quote, as to the UN, things will be different after January 20th.
All right, so you see that. You see what's going on. Now, I'll repeat myself here. The UN has said that Israel should not be expanding their settlements into the West Bank. You know, it's basically occupied territory that belongs to, really, the West Bank belongs to Jordan, and you have Palestinians that are there. So they're saying that they really shouldn't be expanding because there's like some things on the table that are solutions. No, the two-state solution, to have Israel and then to have Palestine. West Bank, Gaza, that can belong to the Palestinians, and then Israel can be Israel. Now, some would say that all that land right there, you know, that whole Levant region, that belongs to Israel. But the question is, if all of it belongs to Israel, then why is the West Bank, Gaza, and Golan, why is it controlled by Israel, but the people that live there do not have full rights as Israelis? Right? If it's all Israel, then why is it not all Israel? The difference between a place like West Bank, Gaza, Golan, these places, you have like restrictions on the people that live there. If you're not an Israeli or if you're not Jewish, you don't have full rights to be able to move around. You can't just do whatever you want to do. That is the whole point. So then when they encroach upon the West Bank and they continue to encroach, they continue to build settlements, what happens is people that live there are pretty much either forced out or they have to just be subjugated by the Israeli government in the way that they don't really want, even more than what they are right now. Right? They got to get pushed into tighter and tighter spaces, just like Gaza Strip and just like West Bank. Now, some would say people that live in Gaza Strip and West Bank, they are immigrants recently to the place. And I understand that, you know, basically saying that they weren't there from the beginning since 1948 when Israel was created, that they were there recently because Egypt at one point controlled the Gaza Strip, as they did Sinai, which they have Sinai back. Originally, Israel claimed Sinai Peninsula, but Egypt has that back, and they do not have the Gaza Strip back. Now, some would say people are just leaving Egypt and going to Gaza for a better life. I'm not really sure if that's true or false. And then also West Bank. Some say that people come from different places to go to West Bank to immigrate there. Now, I understand that. But at the same time, if that place is going to be designated for them, then let it be designated for them. You can't have it be designated for them and then encroach upon it. Because now people that moved there from somewhere else are now starting to see less and less land available to them. And many of them may not be able to go back to wherever they come from. So at a certain point, how long do you encroach upon people's land, or land that you say belongs to someone else, or land that you say is designated for other people? How long do you keep encroaching upon their land to the point where it's like all of that land right there belongs to Israel? So then there is nowhere for the people that are not Israeli to go. And that's unfair. Now, some would say that the land of Israel was created because the people of Jewish descent kept getting expelled from wherever they were. You know, they got expelled from like 100 places since the beginning, like since Christ was killed. They've been expelled from many different places. And that is why they need Israel to have a land of their own so they won't be persecuted and expelled anymore. And I understand that point. But you can't at the same time persecute other people. You can't encroach upon other people and basically expel them because you fear being expelled. That's unfair. Now, some will also say that, hey, it was a war that was won and that's what it is. But at the end of the day, you can't have spaces that are designated for people and then act like, you know, it's kind of like theirs, but it's not really. Either it's going to be yours or it's not. And even in America, we conquered land over here. And if you come from a different country, you're still able to come to America. It's not an ethnocentric state. See, Israel, in order to be an Israeli citizen, you have to be basically a Jewish person to become a newly, admitted citizen. You know, there's like a bunch of Muslims that live there right now, but they were there already. They were there at 1948. You know, people that were alive during that period of time and also their descendants, they were already there. So it's not like you could say, oh, there's 1 million Muslims in Israel as a way to say that immigration is not just relegated to Jews, because that's what it is. You can't go there from somewhere else. Like you can't come there from Qatar or Yemen or something like that today. You have to be an ethnic Jew. Even some ethnic Jews of different backgrounds are discriminated against. I think there's ethnic Jews from Ethiopia or Somalia, which are Africans, and they're not really the same as the Jews that are there that are basically Europeans. So you got a lot of problems with the state of Israel. All of that aside, you got problems with the ability of people to be able to move about and people encroaching upon their land. The Israelis, that is, encroaching upon land that Israel says does not belong to them necessarily. But it's confusing. Some say that that land belongs to them. Some say that it doesn't. But if the land belongs to them, then it belongs to them. It shouldn't be any restrictions upon travel. It shouldn't be like these borders that are really tightly controlled, if that's what it is. If all that land belongs to them, then why is it like sectioned off and quartered and controlled, and people in there can't really move around the way people on the outside of those borders within the same state can move around? It doesn't really make any sense. Now, the whole problem that Benjamin Netanyahu had was Obama not voting for the resolution, which basically he's saying is like voting against it. But let's not go too far here. Let's kind of pump the brakes, because you went past the resolution, like I said earlier, for Crimea against Russia that said that the Ukraine is a sovereign country and its border should be respected, and they do not recognize Russia's annexation of Crimea. You know, the UN, that is. I'm not talking about the international community. I think the international community has recognized Crimea as now being part of the Russian Federation. But the UN passed a resolution that says that they do not recognize that, and they recognize the sovereign borders of the Ukraine. In that vote, Israel was also absent. So I really don't understand. How can you say that it's wrong for Obama to be absent from a vote that says that Israel should not be able to do whatever they want to just build settlements, you know, in perpetuity and expand their borders beyond where they were in 68, 67. How can you say that's wrong for Obama to do that when Israel did not vote for a resolution that says that Russia should not be able to encroach upon the Ukraine and take Crimea? It's the same thing to me, even though Crimea originally was part of Russia. It was part of Russia for longer than California was of the U.S. People there are mostly ethnically Russian and they speak Russian. Well, I don't want to say mostly ethnically Russian, but there's a lot of ethnic Russians in Crimea already, and many of them already speak Russian. It's right there, you know, in the Odessa. It's right there, right at Russia. So it's not like people coming from Poland, Russia, Germany, etc., to go all the way to the Middle East and create a new country in 1948. But I digress. I'm not being anti-Semitic because I like the Jews. Shout out to all the Jews. A lot of Jews out there, good people. But just because Israel has problems does not mean that I'm against Jews. You understand what I'm saying? All countries have problems and all countries should be able to be criticized. And you can't just say because a country has Jews in it and it was created because of the persecution of Jews that that country must be perfect, because there is no perfection on planet Earth. That's just not possible to attain. And the UN was able to see that with the resolution. You cannot keep encroaching upon people's lands without any kind of like kickback or any kind of, any kind of problems to arise. And I think the main reason, as I close, I think the main reason for the resolution was because of all the terrorism going on in that actual region. There's a lot of terrorism happening, and, people talking about the rockets coming from Hamas and Hezbollah or whatever. I understand that, but at the same time, you're agitating people when you keep encroaching upon the place where they live. You could say that land belongs to Israel, but at the same time, you're saying that it belongs to other people. You're saying that the land belongs to Israel, but you're allowing others to live there. If you're going to allow them to live there, then allow them to live there. Don't, ride the fence in between expelling them outright, like what happened in Nazi Germany, and then letting them stay. Because basically what you're doing right now is a slow expulsion, either expulsion or subjugation. People in Gaza Strip kind of live like in a concentration camp or a prison. They can't really leave their area. They can't move around freely. Now, if that's what it is, then don't further encroach upon them to kind of like move them out. Because that's what's happening, really, I think, in my opinion. They're trying to move them out to take over their whole land. And that's just what it is. And it's unfortunate. I say shout out to all the Jews out there, you good people. But this here from Israel is not a good thing. So what do you think? Do you think Israel controls all that land right there? And if so, what is your, why do you think that way? Do you think that way because of the Bible, what it says? Now, I respect the Bible. I respect religion. But can you take the Bible into any kind of court of law and use it as a defense? I've never heard about that ever happening. The Bible, I respect faith. I respect religion. But you can't use that as evidence of fact. It's just not. Or do you think that Israel should not be there at all? Do you think that they came and invaded that area in the 1940s and then made it be their own land, and then they constantly had agreements, and they had agreement in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 80s, or whatever, and they keep violating, they keep encroaching. I think the ultimate plan is to have all that land be for Israelis, people of Israeli descent, and that's it. It's kind of a weird thing because you got a lot of Arabs in Israel, and the land kind of looks like it's almost like just any other Middle Eastern country. But it's weird the way they do it. I don't understand really why they do it like that, but it is what it is. I'm not hating. I'm just saying that it's not right to keep encroaching on land that you say belongs to you, but belongs to somebody else. It's very confusing. It's almost like Jerusalem, where it's East and West. It's almost like East and West Berlin. But that's pretty much all I got to say. Whatever your comments are, let me know in the comments below. That's all I got to say for this video. If you like what you heard, please comment, rate, share, and subscribe. Peace.